Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.
This show is brought to you by Audible. They are the leading provider of spoken audio information and entertainment. You know I'm a huge Audible fan because you can listen to audiobooks whenever and wherever you want. Whether you're at the beach, the gym, or stuck in traffic, there's nothing quite like Audible. Go to audiblepodcast.com/Lutz and sign up today. You are listening to the FinancialSurvivalNetwork.com. I'm Kerry Lutz on 1230 WBZT. And it's time for another Triple Lutz Report. This is episode 289. We're talking about Detroit. It is August 1st, 2013. I can't believe I've done 289 of these things. It just amazes me. I mean, I've done thousands of radio shows now in 2.5 years. Actually, it's going on 3. I don't even know what to say. We're approaching, I think we crossed 7 million downloads and millions of YouTube views, and it's wow. What can I say to you? Thanks for listening. That kind of doesn't go far enough, but hey, I don't want to get mushy and sentimental with you. You know, I've done a lot of discussions about Detroit, what's going on there, why it's a failed city, and it's always from the outside looking in. A guy here named Bill Nojay, and I want to make it clear from the get-go, he's a Republican. He's actually a member of the New York State Assembly, so you know that he's plugged into the kleptocratic system in New York. He's in upstate New York, so maybe his ancestors were farmers. I don't know what the deal is. Somehow he landed himself a plum position, contract employee, chief operating officer of the Detroit Department of Transportation. And he was there for 8 months. And as he said, he got a vivid sense of the city's dysfunction. He said every day a problem would arise. He'd come up with his staff with a solution, but implementing the fix would prove impossible. As he said, every morning they would learn of vendors that had cut them off for lack of payment, because let's face it, the biggest problem for a business that extends credit is deadbeat clients. You know, any business that gives credit other than to long-standing clients, you know, is going to have deadbeat customers. And when you have a long-standing client that goes bad, that's the worst thing, because they can keep stringing you out, keep just promising. And, you know, they were good in the past. They paid their bills. And especially when it's a government, you say, well, they got to pay it. They're the government. How can they not pay it? And this is the situation that probably hundreds of vendors of Detroit found themselves in. And finally, they just throw up their hands and they say, you know what? I don't care how good you were in the past. We're just not doing it anymore. So, you know, Detroit being a bunch of idiots, incompetence, poor management, they alienated these vendors that they probably had relationships with for decades going back. So he describes it that each morning it was damage control, putting out fires, and suppliers of essential items like motor oil, brake pads would cut them off, and then they'd have to go wire them some money to pay off part of the bill or all of the bill, or find new suppliers. And bus engines that the department had sent out to be overhauled were sidelined for months when vendors refused to ship them back because, of course, the city hadn't paid for the repair. And he said there were days when 20% of the scheduled runs, bus runs, didn't go out because they didn't have road-ready buses. Just outrageous. And this is what you expect from government, because government always fails when government undertakes socialized programs, eventually they run out of other people's money, and failure is the end result. And I hate to keep going over Detroit, but there's lessons here, or as your president would say, this is a teachable moment. And as he said, the obvious solution for a cash-tight operation is to triage vendor payments to ensure that absolutely essential items are always there. But of course, this being Detroit, no one in the transportation department could authorize payments. That had to be done in City Hall by some hack out there. And that person decided willy-nilly who got paid and who didn't. And maybe the person got taken care of to make those decisions. I'm not saying they did or didn't, but it wouldn't surprise me if they did. And vendors supplying non-critical items got paid, while others who did supply critical items didn't get paid, and buses got left being sidelined. And of course, lawsuits, many of them fraudulent and frivolous, get filed every day, alleging injuries on municipal property. And at the transportation department, they had hundreds of them arising from bus accidents. And how many of these claims were fraudulent? Well, how many got settled with the cost of settlement and legal fees posted against transportation's budget at unnecessarily high cost? Who knew? It was impossible to figure out, since the city's law department handled all litigation and settled the cases without consulting the DOT staff. And it was the law department's policy to settle virtually all claims, which meant that the transportation department was easy prey for corrupt personal injury lawyers bringing cases with little or no merit, costing the city millions. And DOT, they tried to hire their own lawyers to fight these claims, but they were blocked by the city charter, which said that the city law department had to hire all outside counsel and nobody could do it. I mean, it's just disgusting. And, of course, they tried to do something about it. The mayor's office told them that the union representing the law department, in Detroit, even the lawyers were unionized, would block any such approval. Then, of course, you had disability and workers' comp claims, which were routinely paid with no investigation into their validity. More than 80% of the transportation department's 1,400 employees were certified for family medical leave absences, meaning that they could call in for a day off without prior notice, often leaving buses without drivers or mechanics. And management's only recourse to get the work done was to pay the remaining drivers overtime, if you could believe this, at time and a half rates. Their overtime costs were running at over $20 million a year. And then the city council was a prime enabler of this. They obstructed, while he was at, Nojay was at DOT, roughly 10% of bus fare collection boxes were broken. And as he said, in any other city, getting a contract to buy spare parts to repair the boxes would be routine. And the city council publicly expressed outrage that they didn't fix the fare boxes, since the city was losing $5 million a year in uncollected fares. But the reason they couldn't fix the boxes was because the contract for the necessary spare parts had been sitting untouched in the city council's offices for 9 months. And this was due to past corruption, and virtually every contract had to be approved by the city council, resulting in many months of delays. So micromanagement by the city council was a prime reason why all this stuff was getting screwed up. And he said he once sat for 5 hours waiting to discuss a minor matter while city council members debated whether to authorize demolition of individual vacant and vandalized houses one by one, of which, there's tens of thousands of them there. And then he talks about how union and civil service rules made it virtually impossible to fire anyone. There's a 6-step disciplinary process providing job protection to everyone with a pulse, regardless of poor performance, bad behavior, or anything else. I guess you had to kill somebody on the job to get fired. So he said even the time-honored management technique of moving someone up or sideways where he or she would do less harm didn't work in Detroit because job descriptions and job qualifications requirements were so strict, it was impossible for management to rearrange the organization chart. And he was a manager with virtually no authority over personnel, which you see repeatedly in government all over the place. And, like I said, this article was in the Wall Street Journal. He wrote this editorial, and he's no Cub Scout. He's in government. He works in New York State, which is the epicenter of governmental dysfunction. So for him to be saying that Detroit is so messed up that he couldn't deal with it, this place is just one cluster, what, and that the place finally blew up and broke down and stopped working. You can't be surprised over this. And then he said, you think things are really bad? Well, wait till the federal government gets involved because it only makes things worse. A federal lawsuit charging the DOT did not fully comply with the law in accommodating disabled riders dragged on for years because of idealistic but painfully naive Justice Department attorneys seeking regulatory perfection. Does that sound familiar? He said he felt like a guy in the boiler room of the Titanic, desperately bailing to keep the ship afloat for a few more hours while the DOJ attorneys complained from their first-class cabin that their champagne wasn't properly chilled. And Detroit's other municipal departments, he said, had similar challenges. I would call them failings. He'd often compare notes with managers trying to run the city's streetlights, recreation programs. Why does a city run recreation programs? Can't people recreate themselves? Can't they have fun on their own? You need the government for recreation? Give me a break. The police departments and smaller offices, he said, all of them face similar gridlock. Detroit needs to deconstruct, get rid of all these departments. I think at this point they have privatized DOT, and now things are starting to get straightened out. But you know what? Get rid of the buses. Dump them. Private industry will come in and take up the slack, I promise you. And as he said, the last thing Detroit needs is a bailout. What it needs is to sweep away a city charter that protects only bureaucrats, civil service rules that straitjacket municipal departments, and obsolete union contracts. I believe that Rick Snyder made Detroit and the state of Michigan a right-to-work state. So hopefully that'll be going bye-bye soon. I think that Kevin Orr will be able to get rid of all that. He said a bailout would just keep the dysfunction in place. Time to start over. No, Jay. Hopefully we're going to have him on the show. My producer, Brett, has invited him. We tracked him down to his cushy office in the New York State Assembly and want to have him on because, look, if he thinks that Detroit is dysfunctional compared to New York State, well, then, boy, it's something else going on there. And, hey, I got some questions for him, but we'll get into it when he comes on the show, which hopefully he will. So, man, there are obviously levels of dysfunctionality in government. And if New York is a 6 or a 7, then Detroit, on a scale of 1 to 10, has got to be close to a 99. Florida here, I don't even know where it ranks on it, but different towns, this is why local control is so important. They should probably dissolve the city of Detroit, break it up into neighborhood controls. Maybe we need manors, and we need to go back to the old English way. If we break it up into baronial manors, and you have dukes and earls and that kind of thing, and I guess the Bloods and the Crips, we could have the Crip Manor and the Blood Manor, and a little absurd, but in a way it's kind of devolved down to that already. And we need to break up Detroit. It can't be managed as it is now. Create that downtown, That seems to be fairly vibrant. And let's just put General Motors in charge of it. Well, maybe not General Motors, maybe not Chrysler. Let's put Les Gold in charge of downtown Detroit. If he can run a pawn shop, he can run downtown Detroit. And let's split the town up, and the pieces that work create their own towns. The pieces that don't, split them up, do something with them. But what exists now as Detroit needs to be done away with. Probably was a bad idea in the first place, and do something new. This is Kerry Lutz. Been another Triple Lutz report. Signing off. The show was brought to you by Audible. If you want to listen to it, Audible has it. Would you believe they've got over 100,000 titles in virtually every genre you can think of? And don't forget, you'll get a free audiobook and 30-day trial just for signing up today at audiblepodcast.com/Lutz. That's audiblepodcast.com/LUTZ.
The Financial Survival Network, helping you to survive and thrive in the new economy. Get our complimentary newsletter at financialsurvivalnetwork.com. This is the Financial Survival Network.